An 84-year-old woman walked through her front door after dinner with her family. The garage closed behind her at 9:50 in the evening, and she was never seen again. A ransom demand for $6 million in Bitcoin was sent, not to her family, but to the media. Deadlines passed. The Bitcoin wallet sat completely empty. And the investigators who have spent their entire careers inside cases exactly like this one began saying something out loud that the rest of the world did not want to hear. They said this was never a kidnapping. This is that story. Welcome back to Cold Case History. I am going to walk you through every detail of this case. The footage, the forensics, the suspect behavior, the DNA, and the digital evidence trail. And I am going to do it the way we always do it here, with the facts, with the victims at the center, and with a commitment to asking the hard questions that this investigation demands. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. We cover every update on cases like this one the moment they break. And trust me, this one is not finished breaking yet. Let's begin at the beginning. On the night of January 31st, 2026, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was dropped home after a family dinner in Tucson, Arizona. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Chiabra, the last confirmed person to see her alive, watched her go inside. The garage door came down at 9:50 p.m. By the time daylight broke over the Catalina foothills, she was gone. Law enforcement declared the scene a crime within hours. Within days, FBI field agents had flooded in from offices across the country. A round-the-clock command post had been established, and one of the most intensive missing person searches in recent American history was already underway. Her name was everywhere. Her face was on every screen. Nancy Guthrie, mother of NBC Today show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie, had vanished, and the entire country held its breath. The story the public received was this. Nancy had been taken from her home in the night. It was a kidnapping for ransom. Savannah Guthrie appeared on Instagram, visibly broken, pleading with whoever had her mother to reach out, to name a price, to show some sign that Nancy was still breathing. The FBI doubled its reward to $100,000. An anonymous source pushed the total past $200,000. More than 28,000 tips poured into tip lines. Hundreds of law enforcement personnel converged on Tucson. And still, as the days became weeks and the weeks brought nothing, something started to shift. Not within the investigation itself, but in the voices of those watching from the outside. The people who had spent entire careers studying kidnappings, homicides, and violent crime, people who read crime scenes the way most of us read the news, began stepping in front of cameras and saying what no headline wanted to print. They said this did not look like a kidnapping. Paul Ciolino was among the first to go on record. Ciolino is a Chicago-based veteran homicide and private investigator with more than 35 years in the field. He has investigated hundreds of murders and violent felonies. He was the first and only expert in homicide investigation hired by CBS News and 48 Hours as an on-air personality, appearing across every major cable and television network in the United States and Canada for over 25 years. His work directly contributed to the exoneration of 5 men sitting on death row. When Illinois Governor George Ryan cleared the state's death row in 2003, he named Ciolino specifically as one of the reasons. This is not someone speculating from a couch. This is one of the most credentialed criminal investigators in the country. And when he spoke to the New York Post about this case, he did not equivocate. He said he did not believe Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped. He was not standing alone. Chris Swecker, former assistant director of the FBI, went on Fox News and said publicly that he was deeply skeptical this was a kidnapping at all. Jennifer Coffendafer, a retired FBI agent, told News Nation that the ransom notes made no operational sense from the moment they appeared. And Jim Clemente, a retired FBI supervisory special agent and criminal profiler with over 2 decades inside the Bureau, warned that if this case was not about ransom, the motives underneath it could be what he called dark. For separate experts, for separate conclusions, every one of them pointing away from the story the public had been told. So tonight we are going to do something different. We are not here to retell the surface story of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. You have heard that. What we are going to do is examine the evidence, and more critically, the absence of it, that led some of the most experienced investigators in this country to conclude that what happened to Nancy Guthrie may not have been a kidnapping at all. And if they are right, the question that follows is far more disturbing. If nobody took her for ransom, what actually happened inside that house? Let's start with the single most important thread in this entire case, the one detail that, according to Ciolino and every expert who has weighed in tears the kidnapping theory apart at its seams. There has been no proof of life. Not a photograph, not a video, not a voice recording, not a handwritten note in Nancy's own hand. Not a single piece of verifiable evidence delivered to the family or to law enforcement confirming that Nancy Guthrie is alive and in someone's custody. Consider what that means. In any ransom kidnapping, the entire structure of the crime depends on one thing: proving you hold the person. That is the transaction. You take them. You prove you have them. You issue your demand. You negotiate. Without proof of life, there is no leverage. Without leverage, there is no deal. Every kidnapping expert says the same thing. The first thing a real captor does is establish that they hold the asset. That happens on day one. In many operations, it happens before the ransom demand is even issued. Ciolino put it plainly. He said there should have been something, a photo, a video, a drop of blood, anything sent to the family to verify that the person making the demand actually had their mother. In a kidnapping this high profile, that proof would have come fast. It never came. Savannah Guthrie herself acknowledged this. In an early video, she spoke directly to whoever might be holding her mother and said that in a world where audio and images can be manipulated, the family needed undeniable proof that Nancy was alive. She begged them to make contact. That was February 4th. As of the time of this video, nearly 3 weeks later, that proof has still not arrived. Now, before we go deeper, if this investigation has pulled you in the way it pulled us, take a second and hit that subscribe button. This case is far from over, and you will want to be here when the next chapter breaks. Let's move to the ransom notes, because if the absence of proof of life is the first fracture in the kidnapping theory, the notes themselves are the second, and they may be even more telling. In a functional ransom operation, the captor contacts the family directly and privately, usually through a phone call, a note delivered to the home, or a message through a channel only the family controls. The communication is urgent. The instructions are precise. The kidnapper wants total control of the family, the timeline, and the narrative. The absolute last thing any real kidnapper wants is public attention, because public attention means law enforcement, and law enforcement ends the operation. Here is what happened instead. Days after Nancy disappeared, not hours, but days, a ransom demand for $6 million in Bitcoin was sent to TMZ and to at least 2 Tucson television stations, including KOLD News 3. The note was not sent to the Guthrie family. It was not delivered through a private channel. It was broadcast to the entire world. Whoever wrote that note chose to announce a ransom demand publicly before establishing any private contact with the family they were supposedly extorting. The Bitcoin wallet address attached to the note was publicly visible on the blockchain. When the first deadline arrived, that wallet had a confirmed balance of 0. Not a single transaction. 2 deadlines were set: 5 p.m. on February 5th and 5 p.m. on February 9th. Both came and went with no consequences, no follow-up, no escalation, no contact whatsoever. More notes continued to surface. A second message was sent directly to Kim, containing sensitive information but no deadline and no actual ransom figure. Later, TMZ received what they described as a highly sophisticated note demanding a similar amount, this time in a different cryptocurrency, accompanied by graphic descriptions of what would happen if payment was not made. Then a separate individual contacted TMZ, claiming to know the identity of the kidnappers and demanding Bitcoin in exchange for that information. By that point, a fourth letter had arrived from that same person, still demanding payment for information, still offering nothing verifiable in return. On top of all of this, a separate individual was arrested for submitting an entirely fabricated ransom demand. The waters were so thoroughly muddied that no one, not the FBI, not the sheriff's department, not the family, could determine with any confidence which communications, if any, were connected to a real actor. Jennifer Coffendafer laid it out simply. She said these notes never made operational sense for someone genuinely trying to collect money. The timing was wrong. The delivery method was wrong. Sending demands to the press before making private contact with the family was wrong. The fact that the FBI and local law enforcement were already saturating the case before any demand had even appeared was wrong. She said it looked less like a negotiation and more like someone trying to publicly torment the Guthrie family without any intention of actually collecting. The FBI confirmed on the record that it was not aware of any direct communication taking place between the Guthrie family and anyone claiming to hold Nancy. No communication, no negotiation, no proof of life, and ransom notes that functioned less like criminal demands and more like theater. Ciolino's next point goes deeper still. He said real kidnappers do not wait because they cannot afford to. Every hour they hold someone, the exposure multiplies. They move fast. They make contact fast. They escalate fast. Even in cases involving organized crime in South America, where negotiations can stretch weeks, there is constant communication, constant proof of life, constant pressure building toward payment. With Nancy Guthrie, there was silence. Not calculated silence. Not the patience of someone playing a long strategic game. Just nothing. No one contacted the family to ask where the money was. No one provided any confirmation she was alive. No one escalated. Whoever allegedly took an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and a daily medication regimen simply went dark. Ciolino said that if someone genuinely had her, they would have made themselves known by now. If you're still watching right now, comment "I'm still here." This story is about to take a turn no one expects. There is physical evidence in this case, and it deserves to be stated accurately. Investigators found signs of forced entry at Nancy's home. Blood confirmed through DNA testing as Nancy's was found on the front porch, though authorities have never specified when it was deposited. Additional biological evidence recovered from inside the residence remains under lab analysis, with DNA profiles still being processed. The forensic picture is not empty, but what has not been found carries equal weight. No vehicle was ever identified leaving the property. No witness observed anyone removing Nancy from the scene. No surveillance footage captured her being taken anywhere. The doorbell camera, a Google Nest device, recorded a masked figure approaching the front door and reaching toward the lens before walking away. That footage, released by the FBI on February 10th, showed an individual described as a male approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 with an average build, wearing a ski mask, gloves, and a black 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart. That footage is unsettling. But here is precisely what it shows and what it does not. It shows a person approaching the door. It shows them moving toward the camera. It shows them leaving. It does not show Nancy Guthrie being removed from her home. The cameras positioned around the property that might have captured what occurred after that moment were disabled, and Google has so far been unable to recover additional footage from the other devices on the premises. The footage proves someone was at that house. It does not prove a kidnapping took place. Now, there is one detail from the early hours of February 1st that demands particular attention. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from its monitoring application. A device implanted in her chest to regulate and track her cardiac function lost its connection in the middle of the night. Authorities have attempted to ping that device in the weeks since. Those attempts have not succeeded. Combined with Nancy's dependence on daily heart medication, which Sheriff Nanos acknowledged could be fatal if she went without it, this creates a medical reality that no theory can ignore. Every expert who has addressed this case has done the same grim math. Without her medication, an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and limited mobility does not survive long. She is not a person who can be held in poor conditions without immediate medical consequences. In a real ransom kidnapping, the hostage is the entire point. She is the leverage. She is the product. A dead hostage cannot be traded. There is no payday, no deal, nothing to negotiate with. And yet 3 weeks of total silence, no medical intervention, no proof of life, no contact of any kind. That is not a kidnapping strategy. That is something else entirely. So where does this leave us? If proof of life never came, if the ransom notes went to the press rather than the family, if both deadlines expired against empty cryptocurrency wallets, if no kidnapper ever called, never negotiated, never followed up, if the forensic evidence confirms someone was at the house, but not that anyone was taken, and if the medical arithmetic says an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and daily medication needs could not realistically survive 3 weeks in captivity without care, then the central question stops being who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie and starts being whether anyone kidnapped her at all. Ciolino suggested the evidence could point towards something far more personal, possibly involving someone Nancy knew, an event that bore none of the characteristics of a stranger abduction. He said the case had the markers of something staged, something constructed to resemble a kidnapping without possessing any of the mechanics that make a kidnapping actually function. That theory spread rapidly. One comment circulating online captured what thousands of people were already thinking, that professional kidnappers do not hold a high-profile victim for a week, let alone 3. Every hour increases their risk of being caught. They want to be paid immediately. The absence of any pressure, any contact, any urgency just does not fit. And then it said the thing most media outlets were unwilling to say directly, that it felt more like someone had harmed this woman and was using the kidnapping narrative as a deliberate diversion to pull the investigation in the wrong direction. That comment resonated because it aligned precisely with what the credentialed experts were already saying. It was further supported when a source close to the investigation told reporters that there was a belief internally that Nancy's disappearance may have been the result of what they described as a burglary gone wrong. Multiple experts who independently reviewed the doorbell footage said the incident did not display the characteristics of a planned abduction. That same source indicated that the prevailing investigative belief was that Nancy could still be alive, but the distance between that belief and the available evidence continues to grow. Go back to the doorbell footage now, because if the alternative theory is correct, that footage takes on an entirely different meaning. The figure who appears at Nancy's front door in the dead of night, is dressed entirely in items assembled from a single shopping trip. The Ozark Trail backpack is confirmed as a Walmart exclusive. The remaining items are believed to have come from there as well, though not confirmed as exclusive to the store. The ski mask, the gloves. Every element of this person's appearance was chosen for anonymity and disposability. Nothing traceable, nothing distinctive. A ghost assembled from a shopping cart. If the goal was to kidnap Nancy Guthrie, why approach the camera directly and walk away? Why not enter immediately? Why is there no evidence of a vehicle, a second person, any indication that a human being was being moved? Now consider the alternative. If the objective was not to take her, but to create a visual record that screamed intruder was here, then the footage serves an entirely different function. It becomes the one piece of evidence that makes the kidnapping narrative believable. It is the prop, the stage dressing, the thing investigators and the public point to and say, someone came for her. And Sheriff Nanos himself acknowledged that investigators have not ruled out the involvement of an accomplice, someone who may have assisted the person captured on camera. If a second individual was involved, it opens the question of whether the figure on the doorbell footage was the one who acted or simply the one who was meant to be seen. Now let's address the DNA, because it should have broken this case open. A pair of black gloves was recovered along North Campbell Drive, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. Those gloves appear to match the type worn by the masked figure in the footage. Forensic testing confirmed the presence of DNA consistent with an unknown male profile. That profile was submitted to CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, a national database containing over 19.2 million offender profiles, more than 6.1 million arrestee profiles, and 1.4 million forensic profiles as of November 2025. It is the most comprehensive law enforcement DNA database in existence. There was no match. Additionally, the DNA recovered from those gloves did not match the separate biological evidence found inside Nancy's home, which means there may be genetic material from multiple unknown individuals connected to this scene. Investigators then turned to forensic genetic genealogy, the same technology that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of silence and led to the arrest of Brian Kohberger in the Idaho student murders. It is powerful, but it takes time. And the absence of a CODIS hit tells us something significant on its own. Whoever left that DNA has no prior criminal record in the system. That is unusual in a stranger abduction where perpetrators frequently carry a history of violence. It is less unusual if the person involved was selected or selected themselves precisely because they leave no trace in any database. On February 16th, the Pima County Sheriff publicly cleared every member of Nancy Guthrie's immediate family. Her children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, along with all of their spouses, were removed as suspects. Sheriff Nanos stated that the family had been cooperative and gracious throughout, and that they are victims in this case. He said suggesting otherwise is not only wrong, it is cruel. DNA recovered from the home did not match family members or anyone in close regular contact with Nancy. This needs to be stated clearly and without ambiguity. The Guthrie family has been fully exonerated by law enforcement. The online speculation that targeted family members, including Annie Guthrie's husband Tommaso Chiabra, who was the last confirmed person to see Nancy alive on the night she disappeared, was directly addressed and rejected by the sheriff's department. But clearing the family does not answer the central question. If Nancy was not taken for ransom and the family is not involved, then who did this? Was it someone who knew her daily routine? Someone who knew she lived alone in a single-story brick house on an acre of desert land in a community with no street lighting? Someone who knew the specific vulnerability of an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility and an implanted pacemaker? Those questions remain unanswered, and the investigation into anyone who may have had access to her home, her schedule, or her vulnerabilities has generated almost no public information. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this only work when people stay and tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing my global family represent. Drop your country or city in the comments. Here is where the investigation stands. Approximately 400 law enforcement personnel remain assigned to this case. The FBI's 24-hour command post in Tucson remains operational with crisis management specialists, analytic support, and investigative teams in place. Authorities are coordinating with agencies in Mexico, though Sheriff Nanos has stated there is no indication Nancy was transported across the border. Genetic genealogy testing is underway on DNA recovered from the scene. Search warrants have been executed at multiple locations, including a property approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home where FBI and SWAT units moved in, detaining 3 individuals who were later released without charges. Investigators have canvassed local gun stores, Walmart has provided purchasing records for every Ozark Trail backpack sold online and in stores over recent months, extending well beyond the Tucson area. Between 40 and 50,000 leads have been submitted across all tip lines combined. That is an enormous volume of activity. And yet, nearly 3 weeks into this investigation, there is no named suspect, no identified vehicle, no confirmed motive, and no public indication that law enforcement has committed exclusively to a kidnapping theory. Listen carefully to the language officials have used throughout. Sheriff Nanos said the evidence suggested Nancy was taken possibly in the middle of the night, and that includes possible kidnapping or abduction. That word possible has been doing significant work since day one. When pressed on motive, Nanos said motive is hard to establish without a suspect in custody, and that everything at this stage remains speculative. Chris Swecker said investigators were continuing their broader search because they were giving room for the possibility that this was not a kidnapping at all. That is not the language of an investigation locked onto a single theory. That is the language of one keeping every door open, including doors the public has not yet been asked to walk through. And beneath all of it, beneath the forensics and the press briefings and the tip lines and the search warrants, sits the simple, unbearable arithmetic of survival. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Her pacemaker has been unresponsive since 2:28 in the morning on February 1st. She requires daily heart medication that her own sheriff said could be fatal to go without. She lives with constant pain. She has limited mobility. Her daughter Savannah described her heart as fragile. It has been 19 days. If she is alive and being held somewhere, then whoever has her has kept a medically fragile 84-year-old woman alive for nearly 3 weeks without any sign they obtained her medication, accessed medical care, or made any attempt to confirm to her family that she is still breathing. In a ransom kidnapping, the hostage is everything. She is the only leverage. There is no transaction without her. A dead hostage ends the operation before it begins. And yet no one has proven Nancy Guthrie is alive. Not to her family, not to law enforcement, not to anyone. If she is not alive, then the kidnapping narrative was never about bringing her home. It was about something else. A distraction, a diversion, a story designed to point the investigation, the media, and the entire country in one direction while the truth waits quietly in another. That is not a theory from conspiracy forums or anonymous accounts. That is the position of Paul Ciolino, a man whose investigative work helped free people from death row. Of Chris Swecker, who led operations at the highest levels of the FBI. Of Jennifer Coffendafer, who spent her career tracking federal criminals. Of Jim Clemente, who spent over 2 decades profiling the worst offenders in the country. All of them are saying the same thing. The pieces do not fit. Pull back and see this from above. The Catalina foothills. A quiet, affluent, unincorporated stretch north of Tucson. Streets with no lighting. Properties spaced far apart, tucked behind desert brush on lots exceeding an acre. A single-story brick home where Nancy Guthrie raised 3 children after her husband Charles passed away in 1988. A home she had lived in for more than 50 years. A home that is now a federal crime scene wrapped in FBI tape and surrounded by network satellite trucks. The official investigation continues. The family holds on. Savannah Guthrie has said that it is never too late to do the right thing. She has said she believes in the essential goodness of people. Maybe she is right. Maybe the call will come. Maybe a door will open somewhere and Nancy will be on the other side of it. But the people who have spent their lives studying how and why people disappear are looking at this case and seeing something the rest of us have been slow to name. No proof of life. No functioning ransom demand. No contact between any captor and the family. No negotiation. Notes sent to the press instead of the people who would pay. Deadlines that expired against empty wallets. A figure on a doorbell camera who proved someone stood at that door but never proved anyone was taken. And a medically fragile 84-year-old woman who cannot long survive without the medication she was separated from 19 days ago. Sometimes the most important evidence in a case is not what is found. It is what is missing. And in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, what is missing may be the answer itself. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you love, someone who lives alone and trusts the world to leave them in peace, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, because the awareness we build here could be the thing that protects someone from becoming the next case we cover. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. The FBI reward stands at $100,000. An additional $12,500 is offered through the 88 crime tip line. Anyone with information, no matter how small, is urged to call 1-800-CALL-FBI 520-351 for 900 or 88 crime, or submit a tip directly at tips.fbi.gov. To everyone in this community, thank you. Your support is the reason these stories get told. This channel does not exist without you, and stories like Nancy's deserve far more than a headline.